Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So, it's been a while since Sundered Doctrine, and there's a ton of great lore that I still haven't had a chance to talk about from that dungeon. This week, I wanted to cover something really important which actually got revealed within it, which is the origins of the Dread. It's not every day that you get to take an entire enemy faction, and one that's really quite important no less, and understand them on the basis of their entire origin story. And also, it's important to understand that origin story because understanding where our enemies come from means we're better prepared to fight them. So today, we're going to look into the origins of the Dread. Be warned though, some of this gets pretty disturbing. So, let's start with the basics. The general origin of the Dread was that they were created with a combination of the light of the Traveler and the darkness of the Witness. The Traveler's light is an energy of the physical universe capable of creation. The darkness of the Witness is a psychological and mental force that contains the memory and identity of those individuals that served the Witness and submitted themselves to the final shape, or that perhaps were forced into the final shape's memories and fold. The force of darkness within the Dread is clearly the dominant one of their two halves, and the light of the Traveler is merely being used as a catalytic and energetic source, something that allows the shaping of the Dread and the moment of bringing them into the world, but not something that drives them to their objectives. This is something that can sometimes be rather disturbing in the way that it's written, as we'll see. Now, I say all of this, and I do want to make it very clear from the beginning that there is a major exception to this, which goes, I think, at least relatively unexplained. And that's the Tormentors. They've existed before the events of the final shape, namely in Lightfall, and we know that they must have been created therefore by some alternate means. They are likely based off of Nezarec, but it's not clear how Nezarec is involved with this, and it's not clear how some Dread were created with only darkness, and some created with light and darkness. It leads us to some really interesting questions about whether they were also created with the light somehow. If that is the case, then the disturbing question of where this light was acquired remains a mystery. The horrifying possible source is unfortunately, of course, likely to be Guardians and Ghosts, be they of the Lost City or the Lucent Brood. Regardless, we do not know where the Tormentors came from, aside from that notion that they may have been created with another source of light, and that they are somehow intrinsically linked to Nezarec and probably based off of his memory. All this aside, we can start to see how the Witness began the process of creating the Dread from their memories. Now, how do we access the memories of the Dread? Well, through the armor of the dungeon. The Dread are predominantly creatures of darkness, and the memories held within darkness that made them are so potent that we can actually glean those memories from the remains of the Dread that make up the dungeon armor. At the very beginning of the flavor text of every piece of armor, they tend to read, "Resonant memory lines the materials of this armor. Imprinted within the folds of forged protection lies the flayed origin of the Dread." This is so universal that when it comes to lore readings, you may see it on the page, but I'm not actually going to read that bit of it, at least not today. You'll get an idea of why, I'm sure though, because this happens like 5 or 6 times. The interesting thing is that because these memories are from the Dread, and because the Dread were partly made from the memories of the Witness, some of these memories that we actually get are from the perspective of the Witness itself. Such is the case with what I presume is the first of the memories of the Dread, which can be found in all 3 helmets of Sundered Doctrine. It describes the terrible moment when the Witness first crossed the threshold at the end of Lightfall and found itself within the Pale Heart for the first time. Also note, as is sometimes the case with lore involving the Traveler, it is trying to communicate in these moments, and its speech is specially designated by 2 vertical lines or slashes on either sides of the words that it says. Those communications are more commonly moments of distress or rebellion in this lore reading that we're about to have. Take a listen. With knife in hand and violence in heart, a proposal is made and refused. In the strata of memory and experience within the Pale Heart, live moments once buried, now revealed in the light of the traveler, imprinted in the dread remnants that cling to a fading shape, rendered knowledge through the eyes of the enemy, in search of salvation. The pale heart stands open, a shimmering angular tear spilling color out into the surrounding sky, slowly eclipsed by a billowing miasma of consciousness. The witness surveys its goal, the closeness, the obscurity. Here within the traveler is a plane of unimagined form, potential, unrefined, raw, held tightly in the titular grip of the inculpable, seeding recklessness without care. The witness would wrest that potential from the gardener, casting Troth away in place of an eager blade, one with which it would carve the light from its oppressor, should they refuse to see logic. We are alone. It touches down, and immediately the crudely vacant plane of the pale heart twists, as reinterpreted space sprawls from the witness in all directions. Mountains burst from flat, colorless surfaces, and a shroud of mist cloaks the darkening soil. We have come to claim that which you kept from us, from all life. But we are not required to carve this claim from you. Take up your charge. Bequeath your light to its truest purpose. End our struggle. The witness stops, waiting for a response, and in the softness of absence, they listen. I flow beyond each life, all life. Droplets of condensation trickle through cracks beneath the witness's planted stance. Resistance? Then it is the knife. It thrusts a hand downward toward the ground. It is the offering of your flesh that permits salvation. We can see its shape in the dark, but your light shall forge shape into reality. If you will not sacrifice willingly, nobly, we shall excise what light is needed from you. Soil splits and sinks before plunging into the maw of a great cave. You cannot flee. A gardener tends, atone for the horror you have sown. Give your light to the final shape willingly, or have it cut from you. My children, there is so much more than this. Recognition brushes the witness's cheek, softly drawing it forward into the offer of an embrace. But it recoils, slashing the vanillan air with the edge of many hands. This place must be upended. It maligns hollowness into cysts in the flesh. Foundations upon foundations. I have shaped my work, laid flat. Pain like wind erodes away the shapes that spring from the witness's touch and halt its progress momentarily. The witness flicks finger-like blades again and again, carving hollows from the flesh of the traveler. The work is slow, deliberate, difficult. It holds the surrounding pitch in place and presses against the borders, feeling the traveler's patient defiance. You were not prepared when you uplifted us. It is why you left. It is why you fear your own change now. But where you so change and abandon it to chaos, we correct this error. It is purpose we have given us. Is it not beautiful? There is no sound in the scar of the traveler. This is where the dread really began, with the Witness and its first mutilations of the Traveler. Things like this can also be seen proceeding in the Matiodoxia lore. The armor set from Sundered Doctrine, though, the armor in which these Flayn memories of the Dread reside, is known by that name probably for this reason, the Flayn armor. Considering the lore which is told in these passages, I think the name is incredibly appropriate. From this point on, that is exactly what would happen. Whenever a new member of the Dread was created, light and darkness would be combined, but the source of that light was always flayed from the Traveler. Within its pale heart, the Witness moved towards its goal of realizing the final shape, and by flaying the light into dread, using it and the memories from darkness, the Witness would build itself an army and would face down the resistance offered by the Traveler. To stymie that resistance at every turn, a dark army rose. The Tormentors were seemingly the first, but there were others who would eventually come to also see their forms rise in the reflection of a disciple. These disciple-shaped dread appear to be the commanders of the Witness's armies. Whilst Tormentors initially filled this role, we know that there were others who were created for a similar purpose. We know them now by the same title of the disciple that inspired their form, the Subjugators. Despite their ferocity on the field of battle, and despite being seemingly the first of the Dread to be twisted out of the light of the Traveler, the origin of the first of the Subjugators is surprisingly frail. The first of their number began as a weak remnant that the Witness considered to be a failure. In spite of that, which it would go on to accomplish, they were the first of the Reshaped, Flayn from Resonance. One day they would become the Resonant Knife, and would be the mouthpiece and voice of something other. Their name was Kater. A blade carves in wicked intent, claiming this submission is surgery. The Witness traces lines of power across the landscape of the Pale Heart, from a monolithic structure that casts long shadows over the shifting terrain. The light flows within the heart like veins. If the Traveler would not relinquish control, it would be harvested and exploited to bring the final shape to bear on reality. The Witness raises a hand, pulling at the light flowing beneath, searching for sources to tap. Life presents choice. Ambient warmth graces the Witness's face. Distraction. You cannot stop this. The Witness twists a hand, and the soil churns and buckles, bleeding light in violent spurts across the landscape. Submit. A shockwave of iridescent light roars across the surface of the Pale Heart, encircling and crashing down toward the Witness. A radial veil of appendages sprouts from the Witness's hands, casting cryptic motions in all directions. The light wave splits once, then again. Breakages multiply exponentially across the tsunami until it shatters. The Witness seizes the broken momentum and redirects the blast into the spot it had felt the light surge from. There. It would be a fruitful excision. There, it would draw out a kindled flame of dark ambition and forge it into service. Do you persist out of hope or fear? The Witness looks to the terraformed impact site of the Traveler's blast. This continued, meaningless flailing. It is useless, but you must try. All life understands this law. To thrash against extinction. Now you too feel our burden. We have pursued you to share this gift with you. Are you not tired of this instinctual resistance? Do you not cry out for salvation? It is here. Scars pock the pale heart. The traveler bleeds, and the carving, the excision of light to bring the final shape to bear upon reality, is far from realized. Deep within one such scar, in a space cut from memory, the witness looks upon its old world. A remnant of a remnant, abandoned by the abandoned. A city of crude pyramidian structures shift around it like tectonic plates, groaning in vicious mockery of the wounded gardener's cries. Enough. The witness extends myriad arms in front of it and quells the city's motion into silence. It waves the structures away. This memory, drawn from us, you loomed, demanding worship, but offering nothing in return. How is it you still cannot understand? The witness shapes the edge of their palm as a blade and steps forward, raising the edge to nick the flesh of a frail sapling. You cannot hide this vestige of power. It is a place of pain, an impetus that must be left behind. Drips of silver light are drawn forth from the pale, dying tree until a small pool rests in the witness's palm. It focuses will on the evaporating light, imbuing its potential with memory and ideology. The witness whispers a dream into reality. The light surges and, for a moment, they stand among their people, separate, alone within the possibility of the past before its sullying. Static, droning contentment. The traveler above. Life is not still. The light shimmers, quivering with thin resilience, then fades. The witness is again in the pale heart, the light gone from its grasp. Encircled by a flowering nascence rests the remains of the witness's first attempt to bend light and dark into form. A failure, not dead but dormant and weak. From this presumed grave, it would watch its lineage forged, its witness fall, and in time, this being would rise to prove its worth as a subjugator. But for now, the newborn failure remains on the ground before it. First of the reshaped, Kate Air, flain from resonance. Prove your existence by escaping this death. Should you rise and find us again, your strength will be known. The witness feels the pale heart shudder and turns its attention to the traveler. You are weakening. It speaks through the darkness, a voice ringing in the minds of its denizen. Our host remains intransigent. Choke their resolve. We might never confirm if this was truly the first ever subjugator to exist, given that tormentors were somehow created in a time before, with the events of Lightfall. However, I think we can definitely tell that this was the first of the subjugators that was flain from the light of the Traveler. Kate Air's legacy is one that has already left its mark. If we're to connect a few dots, and we are to presume that this is indeed the subjugator that killed Eris Morn, and the same subjugator that was leading the Dread and the Taken on board the Dreadnought at the whims of the unknown master that is now best referred to as the Lord of Every Nothing, then Kate Air is a powerful subjugator indeed. Or was. It's still unclear if there's any way they might have survived. But despite whatever terrible things they did, or might go on still to do if somehow they survived, their tale began here, in a moment of weakness before the witness in the heart of the traveler. They were the first, but they would not be the last. There were other mighty subjugators that would lead the forces of the witness, and probably the most notable amongst their number from the lore of Sundered Doctrine are two faces that we see within the Dual Destiny mission. Two subjugators known as Yemek and Selin. They were an odd pair, and their story is relatively limited within the mission itself. But Sundered Doctrine gives us insights beyond Dual Destiny, and tells us of their origins that might otherwise have gotten missed. It tells us that the process of their creation was seemingly different from that of Kater's creation, implying that even amongst similar subtypes of dread, the process by which they were forged is never truly exact. One could see each of them perhaps as a terrible piece of art. Even though weavers and attendants are technically different, we'll later see that there was a distinction between some of them as well. And even with this in mind, maybe every single dread truly is unique. That raises some rather disturbing possibilities about the memories the witness used to forge the dread, and whether or not they represent individuals as well. In addition, whilst Selin and Yemek do seek to be led, these subjugators act as proof that the dread are not utterly mindless, just as the same way the Taken might be, at least within their upper echelons. We can tell this due to Selin, who questioned the nature of the future that the witness would create when its plans were realized. This trepidation in itself is remarkable. The witness is, well, very domineering with its servants. It tends to accept nothing less than absolute loyalty, and the fact that a dread, nay, one of the subjugators, was even in a position to potentially question this is a remarkable thing. The trepidation displayed by Selin was something that was a great source of frustration to her counterpart, Yemek. We know this thanks to the arms of the Sundered Doctrine. Take a listen. Torment rent in twain, cascades upon the valleys, and subjugates them again. Endless darkness envelops a tormentor, one of the first strips peeled by the voice's blade. The tormentor is not alone. Light, buried deep within shadow, flickers erratically, as if painful convulsions warp its frequency. It is twisted around an ever-shifting many hands and pulled taut to slick their knife with light like rosin. A heterodox pairing, opening the creation of new forms flayed from old flesh. An eternal voice pierces the darkness. Take shape, second born of pain. Through the light, bent in service to the deep, we twist your form into being. Take shape, now. In the deep, it peels shrieking torment into sistered slabs. Paired from the flesh of our mind, the voice speaks a piece of its soul into the bisected flesh. A living mirror on which to carve our will. A blade of resonant energy carves slender humanoid husks from the quivering canvas. These figments of agony, they are the lessons we will share with you. It separates the thin layers, dividing segments along lines of clustered nerves. In wounded light, your shape is forged. The husk is considered, recombined with the trim, and reshaped many times. With tools of subjugation, you shall teach them. The voice recites memories of deep power into their fabric. From Europa, it imbues control. From Neomuna, serenity. Until all light bends toward the finality of our horizon. With its command issued, the voice fades. Subjugated halves of torment are left in the silence of the deep. Their eyes open to the world and weep. Selene sits with their other half, surveying the pale heart. Sister, what becomes of us when we succeed? Their other half ponders the question for the first time. After a moment, they answer. We return. And what becomes of us? Selene emphasizes. The question frustrates Yemek. She thrusts her lance into festering brambles. We return? Selene rotates a shard of stasis in its hand, analyzing the split reflections. Return to where there is no Yemek, only an echo within the witness? This frustrates her more. She pulls the lance free and stands over Selene. I am Yemek. Exactly, Selene says, letting the shard fall and dissipate before standing to meet her other half. And who were you before? Not nothing, Yemek responds. But not Yemek, Selene says, before pointing to itself. And not Selene. Better buried than faded from memory. Yemek turns away. We return together again. Together within it? Selene probes. Is that what you want? Yemek is silent. I know what it wants. I'm asking what you want. Selene sees the final shape just as clearly as the witness does. It will bring this shape into being. There can be no pursuit in deviation of this purpose, but Selene has considered what follows, what could follow. It takes in the vista of the pale heart again, its gaze lingering on a spot marred by darkness. What if we could truly be whole? A voice pierces Selene's mind and cuts the notion from it. Abandon this meager hope. I want to just go ahead and point something out here. The reference is made to the darkness that is enveloping everyone and the deep here. Yes, I think this is a reference to certain techniques being used by the witness to create the dread, but I don't think this is the same as the deep as the hive might refer to it exactly. I think this is the overwhelming darkness within the witness. Think of what Zavala steps into in the Final Shape campaign. Crucially, even though there is some similar iconography and language, I don't necessarily think that this is the same as the darkness that might be associated with the Winnower. The forming of something new and the taking up of blades here is done in service of something that seems plural and not singular, which implies the witness and not the Winnower. More importantly, it's something that is stated to be created in service to a finality, and that is something that the Winnower does not necessarily want and that the witness certainly does. So despite that language, I think it's just an implication of how dark the process of creation can get. It's not the last time we'll see it either. Disturbingly enough, it seems like these twin subjugators were actually shaped from another dread. They were shaped from a tormentor that had been imbued by the new powers of the witness and to bisect it so that one great minion could become two. It shows us that for some of the dread, again, the process of creation is not exactly the same as others. What does seem to be the case is that those who willingly submit themselves to the witness and the final shape become enveloped in darkness. And again, this is what I was mentioning earlier, that overwhelming sense of darkness that then cuts away at nerve and bone and flesh and sees it remolded into something new. That, I think, is what the deep is being referenced as here. And again, it's not the same as other instances of the deep. And also, once more, I think it is the exact same as what we see with Zavala in the penultimate Final Shape mission. This is in fact one of the more disturbing things about the Dread generally. No two means of creation are quite identical, but each one looks equally as disturbing and downright upsetting. Nowhere is this more obvious than with the Grimm. Now, I do want to get into that, but I think it's worthy of its own video because it talks about a concept that is its own distinct kind of horror, and is one that is potentially a bit more sensitive and might even get demonetized. But I want to make sure that I can talk about the rest of the Dread without getting probably demonetized, as opposed to maybe not getting demonetized. So yeah, separate video on the Grimm. That'll be coming soon. It's actually already created. And to be really clear, I do think that the Grimm's story is the worst, because in many ways, they didn't die once. They died twice. You can talk about the idea of whether they died first in body or whether they properly died in soul, but regardless of the case, what's been done to them can't be undone. And again, a separate video on that soon. I promise it's actually already done. It'll be scheduled for some time later on at some point soon. As for some other horrors, we still have to talk about a few things like husks, attendants, and weavers. But I think we can start with husks, which, perhaps surprising to all of us, are not based on the hive and the worm god's children that they consumed. No, in fact, they're not based on hive at all, they're based on twisted and tortured Eliksni. Again, it has to be said, I am astounded. I was utterly convinced that these were hive. But, as is confirmed by the lore, they are in fact Eliksni. And, I suppose, assumption is the father of falsehood. And we can tell it thanks to the Hunter Cloak, the Husks Cloak. The lore tab shows an Eliksni being twisted and warped by the Witness. It's worse still because behind the eyes of the Husk, which is unfaltering in its loyalty to the Witness, the Eliksni is still trapped in there. They're not necessarily loyal as they are distressed. Take a listen to this. Let the flesh become a puppet of the truer soul, with ligaments like wire. Veskith stands within the great machine, closer than any Kell. He would be the spark that burned this traitor god from within. The Witness would give them the strength to strike back. A spectre of torment moves ahead from behind him to a pyramid-fashioned sarcophagus, which opens at its touch. The thing looms, waiting over the opening, dimming the ambient shine within the pale heart. He was promised a shape of vengeance. As Eramis before him, he would take the power he was owed. Veskith descends, enveloped. Veskith remembers how the Archons commanded stasis through grounding themselves. A voice pierces the darkness. The Gardener has given you only pain. We offer a knife with which to return it. The voice offers salvation, stripped from resonant pain. You accept. He does. The thought washes away. Overcome. Your definition subsumed. The voice resounds in the deep, ringing like metal, sharp. Peeled away and carved anew. The voice's words run like razors across his carapace, slicing his mind into slivers. Vesk. Identity seeps into oceanic darkness. Ith. The voice cuts deep, and life runs thick, each yet unrefined motion marked in muted wails. It is exploration as much as intention, a learning canvas with which to train the manipulation of the light, less gentle than ceremony, more rabid than want. As the nameless flesh trembles, splayed out before the voice, it speaks purpose into being. Your shape is to be a vessel. A cut against the foundation of bone is delivered. A nest that within burrows spite. The words wear away living strata, their deterioration hollows, memories unravel into noise, the pain of their absence honing the edge of this newly carved implement. A bladed engine lurched into being, driven by the voice's intent. Hollow spite spindles around the undulating mortal coil within, a final remnant of the violated, left hewn, infiltrated, and bare. The bladed engine that houses Veskith crouches atop a high stone perch overlooking an arid wasteland. They guard a dormant tormentor, awaiting its commands. They have remained motionless since the tormentor led them here. They do not know why. They are never told why. Commands are given and followed with unflinching obedience. The portal dominates the sky over them. A distant monolith splits the horizon. Brief lucidity. Veskith sees Elixir of his house around him. They patrol, but he does not remember when they began. He asks them how they got here, how long it has been, but they do not respond. His eyes burn. The final remnant of Veskith gazes blankly from within a catatonic fog, unaware of the reality beyond his cage. The unchanging image of the portal burns into his retinas as their body ignores twitching nerves, pleading to blink. So here we get another glimpse into the hell that the Witness was willing to create for those that joined with it and were turned into the Dread. I don't know if anyone's played Mass Effect 2's Overlord DLC. This reminds me of the horrifying state of the individual at the center of that DLC. And, well, the ending of it. Those images are horrifyingly burned into my brain, and the description of the husk's body ignoring the urge to blink is kind of a small encapsulation of that exact same horror. From this passage, we also kind of get an idea of what the Geists are. Well, sort of. They're referred to as burrowed spite within the vessel that is the husk itself. No mention of them being the children of any worm gods here. Although, in all fairness, there isn't anything pushing against that idea that they are still worm larvae. It just makes you realize that if that is the case, they might have also joined with the final shape, and then have been forced into the husks. It's worth remembering too that the memory of them is what's relevant here, not necessarily the actual living beings. They are no longer truly alive if they're a part of the Witness and the final shape. It's also worth remembering that the Witness did go to Fundament, and sowed discord amongst the proto-Leviathan worm gods. And, well, if some of them decided to eventually join the Witness, and to become a part of the final shape, that might explain how the war was able to end. If that's what happened there, then their fate is equally terrible, but that's just me holding on to the idea that this burrowed spite is a remnant of the worm gods. And I mean, I'm doing that partly because the aesthetics fits really well, but then again, this looked as though it was a hive that had been turned into a dread, and it turns out that's not the case either. So, don't stock this up to being the actual case. Burrowed spite is about as much description as we're going to get about these things for now. Finally, we've got to talk about the origins of the Weavers and the Attendants, which are actually talked about separately in the Warlock Bond and the Titan Mark. The actual base species that is used to create these soldiers is obvious and was pointed out from the start. They are formed from corrupted and flayed scions. However, the actual process by which all of this happens is displayed by these last two lore entries, and in both instances they show yet again that the process of being flayed into a dread is a horrific one for all sorts of reasons, and one that is unique in every case, as best we know. Let's start with the more straightforward of the two, which is the Weaver, as displayed in the Warlock Bond. I say straightforward, nothing about the creation of any of these dread has truly been straightforward. But here, take a listen. Wrapped in purpose and wreathed in meaning, the old life withers away. Deep horn calls ring through a pyramid chamber, as thick drapes close around a decorated palanquin. Anxious motion fills the stale vanillan air. The ceremonial mask hums against Aim's face as she adjusts her kneeling posture, waiting. The Scion closes her eye to the vibration and attempts to pass what was happening among the shifting figures beyond the drapery of her palanquin. Aim can hear the low rumbling cascading off Shadow Legion armor before being swept into rhythmic chants projected from the minds of her sisters. But that is all. Her foresight is obscured by the mask as much as her vision. She buries her curiosity and gives in to the ceremony's demand for the unknown. A collection of voices silences the chamber. Aim, first sister of the Eclipse, entrusted of Odzot, uplifted to ascend. Aim swallows the tinge of unsettled doubt the words leave in her throat. Chosen, she would be adorned. She would one day find herself among the disciples, as she had risen to Callus's court and to Odzot's. Chosen. Not like the dogged wretches of House Salvation that skulk in the Witness's shadow, dregs of bidding who hollowed their hearts for power. The Shadow Legion was not House Salvation. They were victorious. This was her reward. The chants resume. She feels the palanquin lift as the procession of gilded legionnaires bearing ornamental blades ferries her forward in a crashing march. When she feels the palanquin meet ground again, Aim steps forward. She hears the grind of stone as the voice draws her forward, deep into a cold stone passage. Enveloped. There is nothing surrounding, coaxing what is within to effuse. Master? Aim's words carry no sound in the deep. A voice pierces the darkness, her mask, and her mind. Aim grips the mask. It shatters into motionless shards. You, most deserving and keen of mind, first of your people to ascend, let our will reflect in you. Aim feels roots creep through the gaps of the fragmented mask, through her iris and into her self. A surge of sensation ripples across her synapses, arresting her awareness at each individual moment before plunging to the next. You recognized, most deserving and keen of mind, first of your people to ascend. It offers to peel the mask from Aim's eye. She questions. Receive truth. Be our hand. Receive sight. Optic layers shear away at each potential shape. The voice offers the knife to their hand. She refuses. A convergence of your potential to serve a greater will. The first guided incision toward deification. Aim begs. All act as one. It carves a new shape from the one who is Aim, with the hand of Aim. A conduit through which the final shape may be rendered. An eye watches the blade reinterpret corporeal form, flayed from what was with efficient brutality. Discarded cuts slump at her feet. Aim escapes into a mindscape. Her flesh remains. Your deeds will echo ours. In totality, in finality, you are reborn. The process was swift, delicate, practiced, and then it was over. I am AIM, who came into being narrowly escaping the cost of a sinister promise. A blank mindscape expands before her, but it is limited by an encroaching presence. A doppelganger, a shadow prowling the halls of her mind. She may be unable to safely leave this place, but so long as she remains, it will be a sanctuary. Here, she still holds sway. Her body is her own, as it was before the ceremony. No mask obscures her face. Out of reach, there is a darkened door. The shadow crashes against the door. AIM blinks in shock, and the mindscape shifts form to a barracks, returning to a place of safety. The door, a reinforced hatch with a viewing port. She presses her hands against the dark door and peers through the hatch porthole. A mimicry, carved in her likeness, stares back. You will not enter this place. It snarls and presses the borders of the mindscape, clawing at the porthole. It shifts form and washes over the barracks. The shadow bores into the walls like roots upending foundations. It quakes the ground and howls madness, sends shivers and cracks through this safe place. But the walls hold firm. I am AIM. You are not. She would stay until only she remained. Here we start to see that perhaps not all of the Scions were so keen to enact the final shape once they had seen the reality of what it entailed. AIM here was able to flee into a mindscape before she was fully consumed by the process of being flayed. Her mind is now a separate thing from that she was turned into. The newborn Weaver manifested within her subconsciousness as this twisted shell of a thing, wearing a face just like hers, but forever lost in shadow. This in itself shows us a little bit more about the remarkable mental strength of the Scions, and the incredible constructs that their mindscapes really are. If it can be used to subvert the power of darkness, and the intentions of a being as powerful as the Witness, then we need to be even more cautious than we already were about encountering and dealing with Scions in the future. We've never truly seen the extent of their power, and maybe here we're starting to see that given the right circumstances, enough desperation, and the right tools, there might not necessarily be a limit to psionic power. This passage also tells us more about the nature of the Scions that served the Witness, and who they were actually bound to. There is a mention here of the Sisters of the Eclipse. This appears to be a group of Scions that was entrusted to the service of the Witness by Otzot, the Scion rebel. The exact extent to which their allegiance now lies with the Dread and the Witness's remnant forces isn't known. In Echoes, we did see that some of the factions of the Shadow Legion were sort of trying to combine with the Dread and give them some form of leadership structure. There's also more that we hear about Otzot from some of the Micah 10 Ghost missions in the final shape. The prevailing theory was that in the wake of Callus's death and the disappearance of the Witness into the Traveler, that there was a rift created in the Shadow Legion, and various factions have now decidedly risen, and it is no longer a singular element. Take a listen to some of these excerpts.
There's no doubt about it, that's Kargan. And he's trying to tap into the Vex network again.
I hate to say it, but this might answer a long-standing question I had about Cabal cloning programs. Apparently, they can clone Scions.
Wait, this guy's a clone? Gee, you'd die for just a little while.
Whatever's going on, we have to stop him. I'll try and pin down what data he's accessing while I look for beam signals.
And stay down!
I've got beam signal. It looks like he's gone deeper into Nessus. It should be easy to follow him. As for what Kargan's clone was doing here, it looks like he was trying to access Vex data on Oxa again.
That's the Scion prediction machine, right? Sees the future in branching paths? Future War Cult has something similar.
Based on what I'm seeing here, I can't be sure they aren't the same thing. The same design. But I don't know how that's possible. Kargan was trying to access the Sol Divisive's research on the Veil as well. I don't understand how all these things are connected. But I can tell where the orders are coming from. A Scion named Otzot. And these orders are recent. I think there might be defector branches within the Shadow Legion. One's not loyal to the Witness.
And they're trying to pin down potential outcomes. Make plans for what? The event of our success?
Maybe. But it looks like something blocked them. But I don't know how that's possible.
Why? What stopped Kargan?
If this log is correct, Maya Sundaresh did.
Maya,
I'm glad you were able to rescue Bean. He's going to be a great asset to healing the Traveler. I can't help but be worried about what you found while searching for him. I thought the Scion defector sided with the Witness. But it's looking more and more like that may be a deception. There's something else going on here. Something we're going to have to tackle head-on in the future, if we're lucky.
haunting.
Guardian, my fears were correct. Anwar's signal was last detected inside the European pyramid. Complicating matters, you aren't alone here. There's a detachment of Cabal that landed a few hours ago. Elsie sent me data on their movements.
They don't appear to be Witness-aligned forces. This could be more of Otzot's people.
I'd heard rumors of some fracturing after Callus's death, but I don't know what to make of this.
Well, some people feel more comfortable with a leash around their neck. Whether it's guiding them to behave or misbehave.
So the exact loyalty of all the Scions within the Shadow Legion was questionable as well, at least by the time of the final shape. The Sisters of the Eclipse, however, have actually been encountered by us a second time, namely within the episode Echoes. When you start the final boss of the Breach executable episodic activity, you had a chance of getting the Tormentor boss known as Vaya, Shard of Contempt. Alongside Vaya, there were Scions who periodically gave it shielding, and they were identified as the Sisters of the Eclipse. This potentially means that the dread we faced in our battles against Maya Sundaresh might actually have a potential place serving Otzot, or maybe members of the Scion forces from Otzot's command simply were sent to populate their ranks. Either way, Otzot is something that Bungie has been cooking in the background for a while. Keep her and those sisters of hers in mind for sure. I don't think we'll see anything at some point soon, but it's something they'll build up over time. And when things are relevant, who knows, it might come to the forefront. Returning to the Dread though, we still need to talk about the Attendants, who are yet another example of how no two Dread are really created alike. In particular, we see the perspective of Urlot, a Scion who was resting within the final shape itself, but was also twisted into a soldier of the Witness's armies. Parts of Urlot were twisted and broken off, only to be reshaped by stasis energy, and then repurposed into loyal minions through the flaying. The actual creation was also accompanied by the assisting actions of a subjugator called Molak Al. Take a listen. Hold the moment until eternity becomes a prison of violent positivity. Scion Olot reclines in warmth upon the Torobatl shores. Serenity holds in a static scape of bliss around them. In their recollection, there is only this moment. Time ceases just after cause, and before effect, endlessly frozen in salvation. Molak Al, subjugator of the Traveler, trundles through the Pale Heart, trampling saplings that reached the sky. They drag heaps of unsculpted flesh by viridescent chains of suspension, lashed to the pommel of their lance, and casts them into a cyst pit within the depths of the witness's monolith. Light trickles from the ground and into the depths as if from an open vein. The witness draws darkness into the cyst. Sacrificial flesh to fuel a new shape. Urlot shivers as their body recognizes what their mind has not. This is not reality, nor a mindscape, nor a simulation. This is suspension. A life held on wire and dissected. She turns away from the shoreline and to the sky. She remembers that on this day, Turabatl fell, consumed by hive teeth like swords. But the moment never comes. They never need to flee. They are never confronted with pain or treason or choice. Only the precipice of anxiety remains. Fear of the moment that never comes. Outside the cyst, Molak Al stands in the shadow of the witness. Myriad incomplete shapes of a scion, Urlot, surround them. Some take the form of shame, of grief, of regret, others of anger and violence, but each of them was the result of a choice made and consequences rendered, a flawed system of causal imbalance. Molak Al waits in silence as the witness works fingers like scalpels across the scion's convulsing body, stripping sections of Urlot away and sequestering them into neat forgeries of experience, their painful purity unmarred by nuance or context. Each a moment cast aside for the reshaping. From this collective pain, we carve you a form of unchanging resilience. The incomplete shapes are slicked in stasis rhyme, their gaps made whole, feeding off the static mind of their inception held in perpetuity. The witness gestures to each shape with many hands. The shapes shatter from their hold and step into existence, frozen fragments of a mind now forgotten. You, warriors of pain, born from salvation, attend to us. So, I think it's fair to say that there are a few very bad ways in which you can interpret what happened to Urlot. The one thing that we're not completely sure of that is important above all else is whether these different stripped sections of herself were simply parts that were different from her, resting peacefully within the final shape, or whether her place in the final shape is now also one where she feels all of these different shards and emotions of her incomplete self. Is she still a whole? Does each individual attendant, such as the ones created from shame and grief and regret and anger, feel those emotions? Or is she all of them? Is this the same as saying that now there are maybe dozens of Urlots, and only one of them is experiencing the joy of the final shape, as was described by the witness perfectly in perpetuity? In these shards, do dozens of other fragmented copies of Urlot live on, ones that experience only pain, and a purpose built into the form of an attendant? The horrifying reality is partly that we don't know, and partly that no matter what, the pain within those memories is still very real, and whatever the witness has cordoned off into those attendants is likely bad for them personally, even if they aren't Urlot. Their existence is one literally decreed by the witness to be that of warriors of pain born from salvation. That makes me think that the worst possibility has come to pass, and poor Urlot is actually experiencing all of this at once, as these shades of her are being created. And so that rounds out all of the different kinds of dread, with of course the exception of the Grim, which again I want to cover in a separate video. Whilst the creation of every single one of these dreads is a seemingly traumatic experience, The most terrifying thing is this simple realization. If someone finds the necessary light and darkness within the universe, it's not completely infeasible that if they are powerful enough, they might be able to make a dread of their own. We now understand the building blocks of what's needed to create one. Resonant memories. And light. Light and flesh, perhaps, as a means by which they can be given an initial form, which is then hewn and flamed down. But, hypothetically, it doesn't just require the light of the Traveler to create a dread. I don't think their creation is technically restricted to the Witness either. If nothing else, it only reinforces the point that we need to guard the pale heart of the Traveler at all costs. It is the prime source of light in the universe. And if it is indeed invaded again, then who knows? Maybe there will be those who set down in it, capture territory, and decide that they want to follow in the Witness's footsteps. That's all theoretical, of course, but given the creation of every dread is somewhat different, I think it stands to reason that there may be as of yet undiscovered memories of darkness that have yet to be twisted into form by light. And of course, there is the further nagging question: where did the Tormentors come from? Do they really need to be created with light? And if so, maybe out there in the darkness, there is a universe full of dread. Anyway, that's all from me for now. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, and leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. In particular, let me know what you think of that Tormentor mystery. Do you reckon that Tormentors are actually somehow created with stolen light? Or do you think that there's a separate process, requiring only darkness? Of course, if you want more lore content from universes near and far, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Parodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.